a session on that. Well, as you can see on the screen, it says depression afflicts 300 million people. That's a lot. And it's coming down into young people too. Here's the cover of Time magazine showing youth struggle with this too. And so here's a section that if you get onto mental health sites, you're gonna periodically come across alcoholism or addiction centers. And I got this information here at a Neo-Life convention from a medical doctor that shared this material. And he said that alcoholism has historically been referred to as being there for psychosocial reasons. And what he said that means is like, they'll say this person's an alcoholic because when he was 7, his parents were divorced, and that left a huge emotional wound and trauma and pain. And I agree with that 100%. And then this person discovered that through alcohol, they could escape that pain and get relief from that pain. And so they said the person became, even though the relief is temporary, the person became alcoholic for psychosocial reasons, things like this. So there was a researcher at a huge medical school in Southern California, and he wanted to do a little bit of study on this. And so he took big cages and had rats in there, and the rats had access to either water or alcohol. So they could drink booze or alcohol as their preference because they had both available. And they put the rats on a junk food diet, and hot dogs, burgers, fries, chips, donuts, Coke, coffee, candy bars, just really highly processed junk food. And the rats began to prefer the alcohol, have a definite preference for that. And they kept them on that diet till they had a whole colony of alcoholic rats. So then they changed the diet to very, very good food, unprocessed whole grains, fruits and vegetables. And gradually the rats began to prefer the water, and they went from the alcohol to, they became sober, choosing water as their preference because they had free choice. And they said this actually worked even if the rat's parents were divorced. And it said that it worked even if the rat's parents were divorced and the rat's mom got to keep the house. It still worked. When they changed the diet to very healthy things, the rat's preference for beverages went to the water and away from the alcohol. So I thought that was pretty amazing. And so we'll switch to my story now. And I am a person that I know there's people on this call that they've had relatives commit suicide, and no one really knew because they knew how that person knew how to conceal the deep depression. The other people were kind of shocked and taken aback because they didn't realize the person was that depressed. And personally, I had had about 40 years of severe depression when this incident happened. I got tested in my 20s, 30s, and in my 40s 3 different times on this depression. And every time the score came back exactly the same, 99% depressed. And I said, well, what does 99% depressed mean? They said, that means out of 100 people, you would have the worst case of depression out of the whole group. And none of my friends knew this or believed my test scores when I told them, because I knew how to completely mask it and conceal it and disguise it. So they didn't know. But my wife at the time, I was married, and she was well aware. They said, they told her to take this 400 question test. It's very skillfully written, so the person can't tell what they're getting at, so that you can't manipulate the results. And they said, answer these questions like you were your husband. Answer these questions like you were him. Well, her score came out 93% depressed, so she was almost dead on. She was fully aware of the level of depression. And when you're living with someone with deep, deep depression, at that level, 99%, there's probably going to be other challenges and difficulties for the other spouse as well. So after a period of time, she filed for divorce. And at that point, the depression became much, much worse. The anxiety went through the roof, started having panic attacks, and I became suicidal. Couldn't work. My own secretary said, don't come to work. She said, you scare the customers because you look like death warmed over. There's really no point in going to work anyway, because I had no emotional energy and no emotional focus, just completely overwhelmed. Well, at that point, my family forced me to go to a psychiatrist because they were afraid for my life because I was suicidal. And the psychiatrist had me on 4 different medications. Still couldn't work, didn't seem to be helping at all, actually. And by God's mercy, Imogen Krause, she is a licensed medical professional, a nutritionist, genius. She's very well read and well studied, and she's a 2 diamond in Neolife. Someone told her my life was hanging by a thread, and Emma Jo called my office. She lives a long ways from me, but somebody must have told her the situation. And she very matter-of-factly told me, look, Bob, this is ultra, ultra simple. Absolutely no challenge at all here. All you have to do is take 6 Neolife salmon oil a day, 5 B complex, and she said, you will have 0 problem. Well, it's kind of funny because when you're talking to someone who's had like 40 years of depression, they cannot even conceive of having no problem. And I've been years of counseling with very little benefit. And, but I trust Emma Jo completely. She's smart as a whip and totally reliable. And I had no other options anyway. So I started on the 6 salmon oil a day, which all that is the equivalent of 2 pieces of salmon. That's all it is. And started on the 5B complex. And to make a long story short, I'll just tell you, the doctor weaned me off all the meds, and she said, you don't need these anymore. So it was exactly as Emma Jo said. She said, you will have 0 problem, nothing. Now, there's this little word called biochemical individuality, which all that means is that people vary in what their needs, nutritional needs are. And there's people out there that need more omega-3 than others. And I'm probably one of those because after being off all the medication for a year and having no more problem, I tried cutting back because I thought, oh, I don't need this anymore. And all the panic attacks and anxiety and depression started coming back. So I'm probably one of those that needs more omega-3, more B complex than maybe some other people. So I just stay on it all the time and do quite well. So 3 things from my story I want to emphasize. I had lots of trauma in my youth. I left home at age 11 to live in a boarding school. We did get to see our parents 3 times a year, but most people will tell you leaving home as an 11-year-old is not probably the greatest idea. I'd been actually sexually molested many, many, many times in my youth by a leader in our community. Anyone in counseling will tell you that's not a benefit to a person, and it could be a cause of all kinds of distress. But the point I want to make is a person can have a perfect life, no stress, no trauma, and they can still suffer from depression because you don't have to have stress or drama or trauma or difficulty. All you need is an omega-3 deficiency. That's all. Because you'll talk to people that they've got a great life, but they suffer anxiety or depression. It's quite common, actually. And so all they need is omega-3 deficiency, and they may be vulnerable to that. The other 2 things I want to point out is that if the depression is from an omega-3 deficiency, then obviously counseling cannot resolve that because it's not the problem. And also, if the depression is from an omega-3 deficiency, then drugs are not going to solve that either because it's not a drug deficiency. So I'm going to advance in these slides here and just show you that this material has been known for 20 years, that what depression is and anxiety is and bipolar, it's likely from inflammation in the brain. There's lots of material on this, so I'm going to show you several slides. See, it shows here, this is from, you can see it's from JAMA. That stands for Journal of the American Medical Association. Psychiatry, this would be considered one of the most elite, reliable, prestigious peer-reviewed journals out there. And they're saying clinical depression is associated with 30% increase of inflammation in the brain. So that's why omega-3 can help so much our salmon oil, because our salmon oil is a natural anti-inflammatory. And these guys are saying that it's from inflammation. Now, here's another one, brain inflammation linked to suicidal thinking and depression. This is from Neuroscience News. So they're backing up that the inflammation is a cause of depression, inflammation in the brain. Then here's another one, depression and inflammation, examining the link, from Current Psychiatry. And they're, again, affirming that if you got inflammation in the brain, we're going to be most likely dealing with depression, anxiety, things like that. Here's another one. New research shows depression linked with inflammation. See, it says even brain imaging of people with depression show that their brain scans have increased neuroinflammation. So this is very well documented. Here's another one, fighting depression and improving cognition with omega-3 fatty acids. And omega-3 fatty acids and depression, you can see there. So this is not a just a wild assertion that it's from inflammation, and that depression or anxiety are from inflammation of the brain. There's just tons and tons and tons and tons of research on this. And it's actually been known for about 20 years that the anxiety and depression can be caused by the inflammation in the brain. So here's another one. Mood swings are worse. They say it's not mental illness, it's inflammation. Now, we're going to hear from two true mental health professionals right now. And the first one is Dr. Andrew Stoll. And he is director of psychopharmacology at Harvard Med School. He's possibly the highest placed mental health MD in the US. And he personally uses omega-3. His wife is on it, all his kids are on it, and he uses it clinically to treat depression, bipolar, memory issues, very good for memory issues, and so on. Now I'm going to switch here to, this is my daughter with her firstborn, because Dr. Stoll from Harvard that we're just looking at there, he said that postpartum depression, which affects about 900,000 women a year in the US, he said the countries that have the least amount of omega-3 consumption have the highest rates of postpartum depression. And Carrie, my daughter here, said that, she said, Dad, I have lots of girlfriends that they'll cry for weeks and weeks and weeks after the baby's born. She said, I have no problem at all because she uses the salmon oil during her pregnancy. So I thought that's exciting. Now, Kelly Brogan here, coming down to the end, absolutely brilliant psychiatrist. She went to MIT. She did systems neuroscience at Cornell University Medical College, psychiatric training and fellowship at NYU Medical Center, board certified in psychiatry, integrative holistic medicine, highly qualified professional. And she said the funniest thing, she just basically attacks, I'm only going to be able to give you about 1 minute of her material, but she said depression is not a chemical imbalance. She said in 6 decades, not a single study has proven that depression is caused by chemical imbalance in the brain. She says before we can qualify something as abnormal, we must first establish what the normal looks like. A normal mix of brain chemicals has never been established because neither the scientific community nor the field of neuroscience has been able to define optimal brain state. So she says, look, if they're saying it's a chemical imbalance, she says, there's no way that's correct because there's no data that backs that up because they don't even know what normal balance is. So anyway, I'm just going to share that she says it's from inflammation, and some of her material says that women eating an anti-inflammatory diet had a 20% lower risk of developing depression than their peers. These anti-inflammatory diets consist of, Alan, listen to this, it's a description of the breakfast pack. She doesn't know that, but that's what she describes. She says these anti-inflammatory diets, which are so successful, consist of healthy fats. What's that? Treated in salmon oil, right, Alan? Yep. Then vitamins and antioxidants, that's pro-vitality. And then she says plenty of high quality protein. That's almost an exact description of a breakfast pack. Then she says balancing blood sugar is one of the most effective treatments for depression and anxiety. And that's precisely what the New Life Shake does, is balance blood sugar. So just to close here.
Bob?
Yes.
Everybody's doing such an amazing job ahead of you that we're about 3 minutes ahead of schedule. So take an extra 3 minutes than what you think you had if you've got more content to deliver. Go ahead.
Okay, so basically, I'll tell you one other thing. She attacks really hardcore the concept that it's from a chemical imbalance in the brain, but I already covered that. But she says this, she says the chemical imbalance myth or serotonin theory of depression implies that a lack of serotonin, the so-called feel-good chemical, results in low emotional states. She says a meta-analysis examined this potential, exploring the records of 14,000 depressed patients. In this comprehensive review of published data, individual case histories, researchers concluded that there was no link between low serotonin and depression, nor any link between stressful life events and changes to serotonin levels. So she's saying that no, what we've been sold is bogus. She said it's largely inflammation in the brain. Now, I'm not saying there can't be spiritual causes or relational causes and so on, but she says when they get people on anti-inflammatory diet, symptoms disappear, which is exciting. And that's what happened to me too. So this is just to show, this is a slide I got from Josh, that our salmon oil is clinically proven to reduce inflammation by 68% in a matter of weeks. So where Kelly and Stoll and all these professionals are saying that it's from inflammation in the brain, the depression, the anxiety, bipolar, etc. Hey, what a tool we have to help people. We have the shake, Alan, which she said that normalizing the blood sugar is a huge thing in fighting depression and anxiety. And then we have the salmon oil, which pulls that inflammation down. And that's why I was able to get off 4 medications and go back to work. Now, to close here, here's the Neolife salmon oil. And there's 3 reasons you want to use Neolife only. First one is that we're the only manufacturer I found that has all 8 omega-3s. The vast majority of the brands out there will only have 2 of the 8. We have all 8. Now, why is that important? Well, I have a friend who has had pain in his shoulder for 56 years. He was in an accident as a 1-year-old and broke his shoulder, and he can barely fasten a seatbelt, and to sleep at night, he has to be propped up on pillows just so. Well, that pain's been there 56 years, and some people said, hey, go on fish oil because it might help. So he went on Costco fish oil, which has 2 omega-3s, whereas we have all 8 listed on this label. He was on that product for 4 years, and he couldn't tell a difference. So I said to his wife, hey, try ours. Theirs is fish oil, ours is fish oil, but they only have 2 of the 8. We have all 8. So he goes on our fish oil, and 56 years of pain, Alan, is gone in only 3 weeks. In 6 weeks, his irritable bowel syndrome is gone, which had been there for decades, because irritable bowel, like Crohn's, is also an inflammatory condition in the gut. So can you imagine, Alan, 26 years of IBS distress and difficulty gone in 6 weeks once he got on a high quality like ours. Now, 2 other reasons is that fish are notorious for contaminants: lead, mercury, cadmium, PCBs, DDT, digoxin. So I called the lab of a huge fish oil manufacturer here in the US, and I said, how many contaminants do you guys test for? They said 5. Neolife tests for 200. And the federal government allows any manufacturer here in the US, fish oil, to have 40 parts per million of lead, which is a terrible toxin. They said they allow that because it's pervasive. It's everywhere in the environment. And but Neolife has much higher standards than the federal government, because where the federal government allows the manufacturer to have 40 parts per million, Neolife's standard is our allowable detection limit, as you know, Alan, is 0. So much safer, much better quality control, all 8 omega-3s. You cannot beat it. So if the person's struggling with depression, anxiety, bipolar, panic attacks, I recommend the salmon oil, Pro Vitality, the shakes. Probably going to get fabulous results. We've seen it happen for many, many people. So Alan, thanks for the privilege of being on here.